Greetings, friend, and welcome to the Between the Covers podcast, where we are working every day to remove the self-limiting beliefs that are preventing us from becoming the heroes of our own stories. I am Marcus Spar, and today I want to talk about an issue or maybe a mindset that is seemingly very common among a lot of the people that I work with and that I interact with. And that has to do with our appearance. This was an idea that came to mind when I was listening to the podcast Experiencing Homelessness with Benji and Faye on the White Homework podcast, which I cannot recommend enough. If you are unfamiliar with the White Homework podcast, it is a podcast about Black activism, and it has really done a lot to open my eyes to a dynamic within the Black culture that I have not had the privilege of seeing or hearing or even close to experiencing, being the privileged white man that I am here in the United States. So shout outs to Tori Douglas and Benjamin Faye of White Homework. Highly recommend that you check out that podcast. What gave me the idea for this topic is listening to Benjamin, or Benji as he refers to himself as, share his story where he has experienced homelessness 3 different times. There are some stark contrasts to what I believed homelessness to be, and it all came down to what I could see. Now, over here in southeastern Washington, compared to the more metropolitan places like Seattle and Portland, homelessness, or I guess technically they're referring to these individuals as being unhoused, is not as big of an issue, but it is something that has definitely been growing in this area. And the people who I see that are panhandling have a certain look that a lot of people might expect. I have seen individuals with shopping carts that are just brimming over with the possessions that they have. People who are sleeping in whatever little crevices they can find. In fact, I have started to see more around here the hostel architecture that I learned about through the Stuff You Should Know podcast, where there are benches at bus stops that have little dividers on the bench, and it's supposed to look like it's this nice separation, so you got these 3 people who can sit on this bench, when really what it is it's an attempt to keep unhoused individuals from sleeping on those benches. As I was listening to Benji share his story, it was, as I said, very eye-opening, because in his story, he would sometimes go to Barnes & Noble in order to just have a place that is warm and pick up a book to read, because that was one of the only places that he could go where it was more expected for people to sit down and read and be in a place for a while. And he expressed a lot of energy and time that he spent trying not to look homeless. And I want to pose a question of, when you think of someone who is unhoused, what's the image that comes to your mind? The reason why I pose this is we think of individuals who are unhoused as individuals who are sleeping in parks, on benches, wherever it is that they can find some place to rest, or they're in a homeless shelter. And yet, I have a client that I work with at present who has experiences with being unhoused. He has not had a permanent place to call his own. He has had to live on the couches of family members, and he's moved from staying at this location to staying at this one to staying with this family member. And there was always this pressure to find his own place, even though he was doing a lot of work to try and get his own place, to find a job in order to support himself. And I had a friend at my previous church who lost his apartment and was living in a storage unit that he was renting. That's a different look at what it is to have the experience in life of not having a stable place to rest your head. I bring all of this up because there are so many people out there who are trying their best to look like they aren't experiencing something difficult in their life, such as being unhoused, such as a loss of a family member or a very close friend, such as divorce, such as marriage being on the rocks, such as having just lost a job, or the car is broken down and you don't know how you're going to either get to and from work and you don't have the money in the bank account. We actually do a lot to try and mask that things are going better than they are. And I'm going to pull from my own experiences of the Christian church. And I feel like this is a punching bag that I return to a lot. And let's just face it, I wouldn't if it wasn't such a wealth of examples of many of the things that I talk about here. I have shared with people in the past, and I have known individuals who have been like this, where they go to church on Sunday and they are talking with their friends and some of the greeters and maybe just some of the other churchgoers there. And people are asking, it's like, how's everything going? And they're like, oh, it's just another blessed day in paradise, or God's so good, there's this, that, and the other that is just going wonderfully. And what they're not divulging is that trying to get out of the house, that person yelled at every member of their family. That this person was in a very heated argument with their partner as they were driving to church. There are individuals who will say that everything's going fine when they have just lost their job, or that their partner is going through something terrible, whether we're talking some kind of physical malady, some kind of accident, mental health, or maybe their partner has lost a job and now they're trying to figure out how to make ends meet when they can only survive on 2 incomes and now they're down to 1. Whatever it is, I have known and I have heard so many stories of these people who are just trying to keep up appearances that everything is all hunky-dory and fine. We often do our best to present our best selves to others, which is something that makes it really hard for others to be aware of any of the struggles that we're facing. As a white man, I have had many, many experiences in the past of feeling like I have to be strong. I have to have everything figured out. Granted, being called a crybaby a lot growing up wasn't something that really helped in a lot of these matters. Yet, I felt that I had to have things figured out. I needed to know exactly what I had to do, what I had to say. I had to have the right connections with people. And if I didn't know what was going on, then I was somehow failing as a man, failing as a person, failing as a husband, as a son, as a brother, as a friend. And so I would not be honest with any of the struggles that I had. I would be depressed. I was being torn up inside. I was being bullied, and I wouldn't tell anyone about it. I felt like I just had to paint a smile on my face and just say, yeah, everything's fine. Nope, things are great. Nothing you need to worry about. All the while, I was going through literal hell in my life. This brings me to a question that I feel is very important to ask here. And that is, if you are trying to present a very specific image of yourself, then I want to pose the question of why? Just become curious about it. Why do you feel that you need to show this very specific person that has it all figured out, that isn't struggling with something? I had a conversation with a client recently who, while we were talking about some struggles that he was facing, that he wasn't entirely certain where these coping mechanisms were coming from, we found out that it came to a lack of self-confidence. And when we were looking at what it is to be self-confident, he was taught from his family that if he showed any semblance of confidence in himself, then that was being prideful. Now, for those of you who grew up in the Christian tradition like I did, will know that pride is a big deal. You can't show pride. You can't be proud of something. If anything good happens, then you're supposed to just point skyward and be like, oh, it was all because of God. And this is something that has created this horrible mindset of guilt and shame about whether we are doing or saying anything that is actually going to, send us to hell? And I worked with this client, shared with him what I believe the difference is between self-confidence and pride, and finding that balance in being proud of yourself and recognizing that I still have my flaws and I'm going to make mistakes and I'm not going to do everything perfectly. The reason why I want you to be curious about why you try and have the appearance that you are portraying to others is it might be something that you were taught to do. It was something that you learned from others. Become curious about why you are trying to maintain an appearance. It has been a long journey since, even like grade school for me, of being okay in the skin that I'm in. I know so many people who don't want to show or admit certain physical flaws that they have about themselves. I know a lot of bald people myself being a bald individual or seriously balding individual who try and do everything that they can to hide the fact that they're losing their hair. I know of people who try and do everything that they can to show that they are younger than they actually are. It's something that has been marketed so much in society today that it seems to be so natural for everyone to try and be something or someone that they're not. There are still things about myself that I'm not a fan of. I'm not a fan of the fact that I am overweight. And I'm making slow progress in changing that. And that's okay. It's okay for me to be in the body that I am. It's okay for me to stumble over my words. It may not appear that I do, but that's also because I edit this podcast. I cut out a lot of silence. Sometimes I literally have to look up the word that I want to say because it's right there on the tip of my tongue, but I can't quite get it out. I am who I am. I look the way that I look. And I can try my best to cover it up, or I can just be me and be around the people who accept me for exactly who I am. When we're dealing with this kind of stuff, there is not one solution that can fix these problems. The system doesn't work for everyone. Going back to Benji's story, again, I want to bring up, he goes into so much more detail and really opened my eyes on why it was so hard for him to find a job and find a place to live for, I think he said 9 months? Yeah, I think it was about 9 months. And it was all because of something that was completely out of his control. And the system that was there to help him failed him. I guess while we're talking about appearances, I think it's important for us to also be aware of where we are judging others for their appearance. Because I have been that person, and this was very much challenged when I listened to this White Homework podcast, who has looked at people who are panhandling, who are standing on the corners of roads, holding out signs, just asking for food, asking for money, asking for work, asking for whatever it happens to be. Just anything that will help. And I have been that person, and I'm not proud of it, but I've been that person who has looked at them and been like, I don't know if you're going to spend any money that I give you on drugs or alcohol. I have been that person who looks at them and says, why aren't you using this time to just get a job? And it really opened my eyes when I think about everything that I've heard around individuals who are unhoused. That it's like, well, why don't they just get a job? How many people need to have a stable place to live in order to get a job? How many people can maybe get a job interview, but they have no place to shower and make themselves look presentable? It's really hard to do any of these things that society says you need to do to pick yourself up, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, when your basic needs aren't being met. And the survival brain kicks in and says, I don't even know where my next meal is coming from. I have been that person who has been so judgmental towards these who are less fortunate, who are less privileged than I am. I'm not ashamed because I didn't know any better. Now that I do know better, I am doing more in order to change these thought processes and these beliefs in order to be more compassionate towards these others and do what I can to help and make changes. A big thing that really hits a lot with us and appearances is something that comes in the form of NIMBY, NIMBY, and that stands for not in my backyard. I know around here even, there have been efforts to create some low income housing that people are like, yes, we need to get these houses built or these apartments in order for these unhoused people to have a place to live, but I don't want to look at it. I don't want to look at these people. Their appearance is going to have an impact on my appearance. We're not the only ones who are trying to maintain our appearances. This is something that happens civically, it's something that happens nationally, it's something that happens spiritually. As I mentioned with the example of people who are just putting on a smile and saying how great everything is in their world when they go and see their friends or fellow church members, and yet there's actually a lot of turmoil. That's them just maintaining appearances. When we don't want to admit that we have an issue with something like drugs or homelessness or the poor, other people with different maladaptive coping mechanisms. That's something that is trying to maintain appearance civically. And in fact, you want a great way to know how others view you? Try going to another country. I remember hearing stories with the war in the Middle East when Americans were going over, and Americans are the saviors in bringing democracy and stopping these wars, and that was not what these soldiers experienced. They experienced hatred and vitriol because they had a different appearance from what we have about ourselves. I believe it is important for us to be honest with ourselves and our own image. I'm not saying you need to go around and air your dirty laundry to everyone. You need to do that with the people that you feel safe to. A really good friend of mine, a close friend, opened up to me just this week, the week of this recording, about a struggle that he's been having. And when I told him, I have a very similar struggle and I'm here to help you, you just need to reach out. He was like, yeah, but that is so hard to do, because if I reach out and say, hey, this is something that I struggle with, I am afraid that you're going to look at me differently. I am afraid of how you're going to think of me. And I get that. I have been there. I have been there for most of my life, trying to maintain a good, solid image and have people think something very specific about me, that I'm good, whether I'm a good Christian, I'm a good husband, I'm a good brother, I'm a good son. Never really was much for trying to maintain an image of being good at sports. That fell to my eldest brother. I think about me and my writing, how if I were to publish a book, I would want people to see me as a good writer. But because I don't believe that about myself, it's very challenging for me to even take a step and be creative that way. All because of my appearance, because of the image that I want others to see. To finish this off, I want to say that just because we don't see it doesn't mean that it's not there. Just because you don't see the struggles that someone else is going through doesn't mean that they're not struggling. Doesn't mean that they don't have their own insecurities. Doesn't mean that there are people out there who are in a very unfortunate place and they're trying to do everything they can to make others believe that that's not the case. When you find someone who is honest with you about these struggles, I want you to hold that with the most gentle care that you can. A great example was earlier today. I went grocery shopping and I have this one employee at the grocery store that I always seek out whenever I am going to purchase my groceries. I noticed that he was not around for several weeks. While he and I were connecting, he was vulnerable and shared with me about some horrific pain that he was going through. And he said that the pain was so unbearable and he was gone for about a month because of this pain that he was literally having thoughts that he would be better if he ended his life. Having been someone who has gone through that personally, who has been in that dark place more than once in his life, when someone opens up about that, I never want to tell them, oh, you shouldn't feel that way. Oh, just look at the bright side. You know, it really can't be all that bad. No. I can't say that because I don't know everything that this person is going through. He was so vulnerable in showing me his real self, and I wanted to honor that. I'm grateful that he is feeling so much better. And I'm grateful that he found the help that he needed in order to not go through with any plans of permanently not feeling that pain anymore. We all have those dark places that we go to. It's okay to be there. And if you are, please seek help. Seek help from people that you trust. If you don't have people that you trust, then find people. Find a therapist, find a counselor, find a coach, find a friend, find a family member, someone that you can open up to. There are plenty of people who will be compassionate and caring for whatever it is that you're going through. I do my best to create a safe space for whatever comes up when I am having a conversation with my clients. And I sincerely hope that you can find that with others. If it's something that you don't have, then feel free to reach out. I'm happy to create that space for you and support you however it is that I can. Regardless, it is I think, important for us to realize that our appearance is temporary. It changes all the time. Libby and I just had passport photos taken, and she was making comments about how it wasn't a very flattering picture. I don't know of anyone who has passport or driver's license photos that are flattering in any way. And she was making these comments about saying how old she looks. And I decided to come alongside her and say, hey, even though you're getting these creases in your forehead, even though you're showing these signs of aging, you're still beautiful. Because she is. And she always will be. For very different reasons. Physically, we're going to change. Mentally, we're going to change. Spiritually, we're going to change. Just be yourself. Don't worry about being something else that you think or believe that you need to be. Just be you. And the people who accept you for who you are, those are the people to spend the most time with. If people want you to change, then maybe become curious to see if that's something that's healthy or not. I hope this is a discussion that's been helpful to you. And I look forward to talking with you again in the next episode. If there is anything that you would like to have discussed on this podcast, then feel free to get in touch with me. I'm thinking of setting up a separate email for people to send me questions and topics and people that we can study for future hero studies. Just know that the world needs you. Society needs you. Whether you are a privileged, middle-class, white American man like me, whether you have different skin color than I do, regardless of your ethnicity, regardless of the country of origin that you come from, regardless of your culture, we need you. You are uniquely who you are, and we need all of that unique diversity in this world. And until next time, live strong for today.